Hi guys, girls, hope you guys had a great week. So it is Gaming News Friday and I am back with a gaming topic of the week, and today we are going to talk about Cyberpunk 2077. So last Saturday on the 16th of January, Jason Schreier released an article which sheds some light on Cyberpunk 2077's disastrous rollout and also its development process, and kind of delved in a little bit on some insider information as to why the game released in the state that it did and effectively what went wrong. This is something that I was expecting to come eventually because, as we all know, Jason Schreier has a lot of contacts in the industry and he generally, does delve in to find out the core reasons for these sorts of things to happen. The last one that he did, which was a big sort of expose, was on Anthem and what happened at BioWare. Well, Jason Schreier, from his sources, apparently he interviewed 20 current and former staff at CD Projekt Red who shed a little bit of light on the disastrous launch of Cyberpunk 2077 and why the game was in the state that it was upon release. Now, for those who may not know, in the media, there's a lot of coverage on Cyberpunk 2077. It's probably one of the biggest controversies of last year in terms of its release. It did have favorable reviews on the PC, and the game at its core is actually a really good game, but it certainly was released with many performance issues, many bugs, and for some it was virtually unplayable on the last gen consoles. It was pretty disastrous, was the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. So much so, in fact, that Sony removed the game from the PlayStation Store. And Microsoft actually slapped a label warning customers that they may experience performance issues on the Xbox One until the game is updated. CD Projekt Red obviously have had to go all hands on to try and patch and improve the game, and there is going to be a massive update this month and also in February, with many more planned in the future. It had a hugely damaging effect on CD Projekt Red's reputation and the confidence of their investors. So much so, in fact, that actually they saw a 30% drop in their share prices, and now they are facing several potential lawsuits levied against them. So it was pretty disastrous, as releases go. But you and me, I'm sure, were wondering what went wrong. How did we get here? CD Projekt Red, it was a company that we always held to a very high standard. They held themselves to an incredibly high standard, and they had always said that the game would be released when it was ready. Obviously, it wasn't ready, and the game was released in a pretty unforgivable state, especially on last-gen consoles. So what actually went wrong? Well, according to Jason Schreier's article, the article depicts a development process that was marred by uncheckered ambition on the part of management, poor planning, and technical shortcomings. Shows how the company focused too heavily on marketing, almost at the expense of the game's development, and how the management at CD Projekt Red had an unrealistic timeline that pressured some of its staff into working extensive overtime. Obviously, the marketing did pay off for CD Projekt Red because, thanks to the pre-launch hype, the game actually sold 13 million copies at about $60 a piece in the first 10 days of its release, effectively making back its development costs in those 10 days, which is insane. But certainly it's had a massive detrimental impact on CD Projekt Red's reputation. And it's going to take a lot for them to pull that back and to regain the trust of gamers, the community, and, their investors as well. So what I'm going to do in this video is just delve into the article and what we learned from it and what Jason Schreier uncovered from his sources. We're going to talk about that and what we learn, and then I'm actually going to look at the response of CD Projekt Red to this article, specifically focusing upon the response of Adam Badansky, but we'll cover that shortly. Let's start off by talking about the article in a little bit more detail. So apparently the developers who worked on the game said that many of the common problems that existed in the game that they were aware of. So obviously Marcin Iwinski, in an official statement, I think last week or the week before, basically released a 5-minute video where he apologized for the launch of Cyberpunk, and he did sort of say it was the management's decision. The book stops with them. They made the decision to release the game in the state that it was. But he did kind of try and defend himself a little bit and defend CD Projekt Red by saying that actually a lot of the bugs, a lot of the issues that they didn't come up in their testing and planning. Well, Jason Schreier's article seems to contradict that. And he does say that of the 20 people that he interviewed, a lot of them, they were aware of many of the issues, many of the problems and glitches, but that they just did not have the time to be able to fix them, that they needed more time. Obviously, Cyberpunk 2077 was a hugely ambitious project. It was a massive departure from The Witcher 3. It's set in a sci-fi world, not fantasy. The game is played from a first-person perspective rather than third-person, and because the game is so different, CD Projekt Red actually tried to develop the engine technology behind Cyberpunk 2077, most of which is brand new, while also trying to develop the game at the same time. So they didn't have a pre-built engine that they could run from and build upon, that they were making things up kind of as they went along, and that really did slow down production, and that obviously caused a lot of issues with development. Apparently one of the members of the team actually compared the process to trying to drive a train while the tracks are being laid in front of you at the same time, causing massive issues. Apparently a lot of developers were concerned about this and the way in which the game was being developed, and just the sheer ambition of the project, and whether they would be able to actually achieve what they were aiming for in the time frame that they were given. Apparently a guy called Adrian Bakubiak, I think I said that right, a former audio programmer for CD Projekt, actually said that one of his colleagues asked in a meeting how the company thought it could pull off a technically more challenging project in the same time frame as The Witcher 3. Now, apparently he did raise these concerns in a meeting, and someone in that meeting, whether that was a supervisor or someone in management, actually answered, "We'll figure it out along the way," as if to say, I don't know, we'll make it up and we will get there, and we've made The Witcher 3, so we can do it, we can finish this game. This reminds me heavily of BioWare's major issue with Anthem, and that sense of the BioWare magic. So because they've done it before, because they've released what were incredible games in, say, the Mass Effect trilogy, or in CD Projekt Red's case, The Witcher 3, there's that belief that there's something magic in the development team that they can do it, they can pull it together, they've done it before, they can do it again. Well, as we know with BioWare, the BioWare magic did not work. You cannot pull a miracle out of nothing, and the same thing obviously happened here with Cyberpunk 2077. Another thing that was clearly highlighted by the article was the fact that the game itself actually didn't have as long in development as we had previously thought. Because the game was announced back in 2012, many people actually assumed that the game had about 8 years in development, but actually that wasn't the case. According to his sources, the company was actually still mainly focusing on The Witcher 3 and its DLC at that point, and that actually full development didn't actually begin on Cyberpunk 2077 until late 2016, which means the game had roughly in effect about 4 years in full development. Apparently in late 2016 as well, when they did start full development, much of the pre-production that went into the game, a lot of it was actually thrown out, and a lot of it was actually kind of reset when Adam Badowski took over as the director of the game, and actually demanded that complete overhauls on Cyberpunk's gameplay and story direction. So apparently a lot of stuff that had already been worked on was scrapped. And even at this point there was a lot of disagreements on the vision and the future of the game, whether or not, you know, things like if it's first person or third person, and what they ultimately wanted to achieve. So even at that point, you know, even though they had 4 years in development, it's not very long for such a huge ambitious project. As well, of course, one of the key things in the article is showing that maybe there was too much focus on marketing and not actually enough on development. Much of CD Projekt Red's focus, according to several people who worked on Cyberpunk 2077, was actually on impressing the outside world. And one of the ways in which they obviously did this was by showing a slice of gameplay that was showcased at E3 back in 2018. Now, obviously, fans and journalists who saw this gameplay segment, which was pretty lengthy, it was about 50 minutes in total, were wowed by Cyberpunk 2077's ambition and scale. But actually, much of what was shown in the demo was almost entirely fake. It was created purely for the purposes of showcasing the game, of building up hype and interest in the game. And a lot of the features in that demo, obviously, such as car ambushes and the thing that we had with the mantis blaze where you could scramble up walls and some different features, those were actually missing from the final project. A lot of developers said that they felt that maybe the demo was a waste of time and development and manpower and resources, that actually it would have been much more productive to focus on the game, the main game's actual development, and to get much of the coding and much of the core systems, you know, really down and built in that time, rather than focusing upon a demo that was never really going to be in the final product in its completion. You know, this was 2018, which is still, you know, 2.5 years before the game did actually come out or was actually set for release. So a lot of people felt that that was sort of misplaced and a bit misleading, and it was kind of misleading the community. The article also covers how the staff was mismanaged, how there was a lot of pressure on staff to work overtime, and how, you know, crunch still was very much an issue. Employees talked about working long hours, even though Marcin Iwinski had told staff that overtime wouldn't be mandatory on Cyberpunk 2077. More than a dozen workers actually said that they felt pressured to put in extra hours by their managers or co-workers, and there were times when they would have to put crunch days of up to 13 hours a day, sometimes a little bit over, and they would do that for, you know, 5 or 6 days a week. A lot of people said that even some friends lost their families because of, you know, these sort of shenanigans, these sort of things going on. And when some staff did talk about the fact that they didn't want to work overtime or didn't want to work crunch, that they were kind of almost made to feel guilty by their manager, and sort of saying, well, you know, someone else is going to have to pick up that slack and they're going to have to work extra hours because you're not willing to contribute and put into the team effort. So it's that kind of like unofficial pressure of sort of saying, well, you're not really you're not really a team player if you're not doing that, and you're just making things more difficult for others. So while it's not mandatory, a lot of people felt that they didn't really have a choice in the matter. One of the other things that does really come out of the article was the fact that the release dates were actually very unrealistic, and that a lot of the development team were not aware of any of these release dates until they were announced by the management. Obviously at E3 in June 2019, CD Projekt Red's management announced that the game would come out on April 16th, 2020. Fans, of course, were excited, looking forward to the game, incredibly hyped, but apparently internally at CD Projekt Red, some of the members of the team almost scratched their heads in sheer confusion, wondering how they could possibly finish the game by that date. One person said that they even thought that the date that was announced was a joke, was a bit of an inside joke, and that they expected that the game was actually based on the progress that they had made. They actually were expecting that the game would release sometime in 2022, which shows just how much work they had to do on the game. Many developers actually created memes apparently about the game getting delayed, and many of them made bets on when that would actually happen. Of course, as well, they did have the challenges for COVID, in the middle of a pandemic. Much of the staff were forced to work from home, but because they did have to work from home, of course, many of them didn't have access to the office's console development kits, and most developers actually played builds of the game on their home computers, so the PC version of the game. So it wasn't really clear to everyone maybe how Cyberpunk might run on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, because they didn't have hands-on with the development kit for those consoles. On top of that as well, there were massive communication issues with different teams working from home, and obviously that can sometimes impact upon what information is getting communicated back and forth via video calls or emails. So it just seems like there was a definite lack of communication, that management seemed to have one vision of the game while the team working on the actual development very much had another vision, and it just feels like maybe the management at CD Projekt Red really didn't listen to their teams, listen to their staff, and take these things seriously. And it is concerning, that clearly, shedding a bit of light that there are big problems in terms of the way that CD Projekt Red is being managed, and that the way in which the game was developed. Clearly, it needed more time in the oven. And it does certainly shed some insight as to how we got to where we are. Now, obviously, CD Projekt Red have responded to this article, and I'm going to cover that in a little bit more detail. So Adam Badowski on his Twitter page actually responded to a couple of points in Jason Schreier's article. Not all of them, only a couple of key points that he felt that he wanted to defend himself on. So I'm going to just cover maybe one or two of them that I think are interesting. The first point that he wanted to cover was that the demo that was shown at E3 in 2018 was almost entirely fake. Now, Adam Badowski, in his defense, I'm going to read exactly what he has put on here and then talk about my views on that. So his response to this accusation was the following: "It's hard for a trade show game demo not to be a test of vision or vertical slice 2 years before the game ships. But that doesn't mean it's fake. Compare the demo with the game. Look at the dum-dum scene or the car chase or the many other things. What the people reading your article may not know is that games are not made in a linear fashion and start looking like the final product only in the few months before launch. If you look at that demo now, it's different, yes, but that's what the work in progress watermark is for. Our final game looks and plays way better than what that demo ever was. As for missing features, that's part of the creation process. Features come and go as we see if they work or not. Also, car ambushes exist in the final game almost verbatim to what we showed in the demo. And if we get a bit more granular about our release, the vision we presented in this demo evolved into something that got multiple 9s out of 10s and 10 out of 10s on PC from many renowned gaming outlets in the world." I feel like he's taking this a little bit too personally there. As for the old gen console, yes, that is another case, but we've owned up to that and are working super hard to eliminate bugs on PC too. We know that's not a perfect version either, and we are proud of Cyberpunk 2077 as a game and artistic vision. This all is not what I'd call disastrous. Now, obviously, Adam and I have a very different definition of disastrous. I would say that the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 is without a doubt disastrous. The responses, the launch of the console version certainly is disastrous. It should never have been launched in that way. Now, I do get many of his points in terms of, the idea of this being a work in progress and, certain things being taken out of the game and being in the game. And there are certain things in that mission that did translate into the final game. And there are certain, gameplay segments that were in the final product, definitely. And I get his point, that it is a work in progress, and the development is not linear. I do appreciate that. However, what I do think that they should learn from this, and what many developers should learn from this, is to stop showing so much gameplay, so much of their game in development too early. If you know that certain features in the game may well be removed because of the way that development process works, then don't show them. When gamers watch this footage, they won't focus on this being a work in progress. They want to get a sense of what the game has to offer and what the game is all about. And when they see a feature that they really, really like, and they see a really cool feature, they are going to expect that feature to be in the final product, but maybe improved even further, because it's a work in progress. It's a work in product. So I think a lot of people, when they do see features in a game that look really cool, say for example, we got to see actual V in the cutscene. We got a little cutscene before that demo. We also got to see, really cool use of the mantis blades, which handle, very, very differently in the final game. We don't even really get to see V in any cutscenes majorly in the game as well. So things like this are really key visions, key points of the game, and those were completely missing. So I can understand why gamers feel disappointed, because when you see something really cool, you're looking at that, you go, that looks awesome. I want to pick that up. I want to check that out. So I get where the developer's coming from, but from a consumer viewpoint, when I'm watching something, I am making that choice as to whether or not I'm going to put my money down and I'm going to invest my hard-earned money and my time in that game. And that's why gameplay for me should really be a showcase of exactly how the game is going to play, exactly how the game is going to handle. So if that might not be the final product, don't show it. You don't need to show it. You don't have to show it. Certainly you do not need to show it 2 or 3 years in advance when you already know a lot of development is going to go into the game. Wait until the game is in a virtually finished state. Wait until the game is predominantly ready and nearly ready to go gold and just needs some performance tweaking and that kind of thing. And then show us a little bit of gameplay. I think, for example, Sony did it really, really well with God of War. They did it really, really well with Ghost of Tsushima. Also with The Last of Us Part 2. Pretty much what we saw in the gameplay demo is what we got in the final game. The only ones that we haven't had that for are things like Anthem, where that demo was completely fake and did not reflect the final product. And obviously, Cyberpunk 2077 to a degree. Some of the things are there, but there was a lot missing, and that's quite disappointing. So I think one of the biggest issues with developers and with publishers at the moment is they show too much too soon, and they spend too much time on focus on hype, on creating hype, marketing, and getting people excited for the game and getting those pre-orders and creating that media hype. That it is very, very dangerous. You're almost going to shoot yourself in the foot if you do not meet those expectations that you yourselves have built. And I think that is why the whiplash and why the repercussions against and the reactions against Cyberpunk 2077 are so extreme, so visceral, because of all that hype and all that excitement that's built up, and then obviously the disappointment that has come from that and some of the missing features. He then goes on to talk about the number of people that he interviews. I think in his article, Jason Schreier said most of the staff knew and openly said it wouldn't be ready for release in 2020. And Adam Badowski has argued against that, saying, well, you've talked with 20 people, some being ex-employees, only one of whom is not anonymous. I wouldn't call that most of the over 500 people and staff that openly said what you claim. So he's getting a little bit pedantic there and sort of saying, well, 20 people isn't most people. And he's right, it's not most people. But certainly I'm sure many people at CD Projekt Red felt that the game needed more time, felt that the game wasn't ready. And I'm sure that some people will have voiced their concerns, but it very much is sounding like Adam and his management team around him were not listening to those people. And maybe that talks a little bit about the kind of atmosphere at the studios, and people felt that they couldn't say what they thought and they couldn't voice their concerns because maybe they weren't being listened to, they weren't being taken seriously, and they really should have been, because obviously we would not be here if the management had listened to the development team and had given the game more time to cook, more time to bake, and to be out when it's ready, which is what they promised initially. So it's really, sad and disappointing to be reading these kinds of articles. It sheds a lot of light, obviously, on the issues, some of the issues that the game had. And to a degree, Marcin Iwinski has almost kind of sort of supported, what they've said by saying, well, yeah, it was a management issue. And a lot of the issues that are raised in the article are with the way in which the development of the game was managed and the focus that the management put on, marketing over development time, development costs, and sort of unrealistic goals and timeframes and unrealistic kind of expectations and pressures on staff. And it's really disappointing, because now obviously they're trying to improve the game and they should be looking, to sort of looking at DLC and looking at expanding upon that world. And it is really disappointing that clearly if they had been given more time to actually work on the game, many of these features that have been removed from the game may well not have been. They may have removed some of these features because they had to cut time, because they had to cut development time and development costs to be able to get the game out by the end of 2020, and that's really disappointing. I don't think you can call that their creative vision if you're having to cut parts out of that creative vision because you just don't have time to do them. So that's really disappointing. But we certainly got to learn a little bit more on Cyberpunk 2077 and the reasons for its disastrous launch. I did finish the game. I finished it this week. I think I finished it Tuesday night, and I will be bringing the rest of my Let's Play, and I am in the middle of writing my review on the game as well, so I'm going to try and get that written over the weekend, and then hopefully I can cut together, record and edit that to get that up by the end of the month for you guys to watch. So please look forward to that. My full in-depth review of this game will be coming, where I'm going to break down my thoughts on every element of it, and it's going to be a hard game to review, that is for sure, and I certainly have a lot to say about it. But that is our gaming news topic of the week. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful, interesting, informative. Let's get a dialogue going. What are your thoughts on the article? What are your thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077? What are your thoughts on the way in which it was managed? Why do you think the game released in such a poor state? Who do you think's to blame? What do you think is the main reason? Let us know in the comment section below your thoughts, and I'll be back again with more videos in the future. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, of course. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye, guys.